So welcome to our fourth week of mindfulness strategies for stress. Great to see you. Appreciate you coming, and going to ask you in a minute or two how things are going. We're halfway through. We have 3 more classes, and today we're going to focus on emotions. So to me, the last class kind of focused on our thought processes and how that sometimes fuels the stress response. And of course, that's closely linked with our emotions. And that can also ignite the emotional stress response. So part of it is bringing non-judgment to our awareness and a sense of equanimity. And I'll explain that. But that's really one of the key results or key skills that we can develop is equanimity. So I will give you a definition of that and talk a little bit about what that's all about. So before we jump into just checking in with how you all doing, let's do 3 breaths for a pause. That's our quick pause to start. And this, like I was saying before we actually started, can be something in one of those quick pauses. And it can be really quick. So it's 3 breaths or 3 sets of quick breaths. So the first thing is just to breathe nice and deep and just simply feel the breath. Maybe a longer breath than usual, and just simply feel the in breath and the out breath and just tune into the breath sensations. Be mindful about it. Second breath is to breathe in again, and this time tune into the body. So as you're breathing in and breathing out, just sense into your body and just kind of check in. How's the body doing in the moment? What's the energy level? Is it comfortable or not? What does the body need? You might ask yourself, what do you need? What does the body need to kind of replenish? Okay, that's the second breath or 2. And then breathing in again, mindfully. This last breath is to focus on kindness to ourselves, remembering to bring that sense of friendliness like we would to a best friend, like we support our family and friends. Can we do that for ourselves? So to bring a sense of self-kindness and self-compassion, okay? And that's it. And the last part, as I've had the word effortless up there, and all that really means is to just remember it's not really hard to do this. We can do this in an effortless way. So if you find yourself straining or kind of pushing yourself during a meditation, just try to be effortless about it. Just try to rest in the practice itself. Don't be hard on yourself. Just make it easy, and that will help. So if you've had your eyes closed, you can open them, and that's 3 breaths for a pause. I have a slide on this that goes over it. It's really quite simple, though, but that's something you can do at a traffic light, or you can do, waiting for a meeting to start or whatever, those little teeny transition points. So just wanted to ask you all, how's it going? Last week I asked you to try the rain meditation or the thought meditation. We talked, I think, a little bit about breaking the worry addiction, but the rain or the thought meditation were more the formal. Did anybody try those? Click into the recorded meditations and try those during the week? And if so, how did it go? What did you think? You can use the chat or just speak up, whatever you prefer. Anyone? Anybody tried it all? Hopefully you're getting a little bit of a daily practice going. That's the whole point, right? The informal practice was to try the stop. Remember that stop? It's like a 1-minute breathe or the 3-minute breathing space. Those are different ones that we tried. And then also to notice unpleasant events. I don't know about you, but I had a couple of days last week for some reason that just one of the, they were like those days that things just don't go right. Um, Here's an example. I mean, it's a dumb little thing. I got a lawn tractor repaired and they brought it back, right? They had to bring it back on a truck. So the guy drops it off, we get into a nice conversation, and he leaves. And I go to start the tractor up, and he took the key. It has like a little ignition key. And it was like, oh my gosh, what a pain. I got this thing repaired. I got all these leaves I got to work on. And the guy took the key. And my first reaction was, to kind of rant and rave a little bit. But then that's one of those opportunities to notice that what happens when something unpleasant happens. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? How does your body feel? I was all tensed up and I was thinking horrible thoughts, not horrible, but, like, why did the guy take off the key? It's such an inconvenience, really a pain. And I was getting, tightened up. So I was getting tense and, like just jumbled thoughts, jumbled emotions over a relatively small thing, right? So hopefully you took a little bit of a time to notice what happens. And then, like the week before, we did notice pleasant events. I want you to continue doing that too. But what happens when you notice unpleasant events? I got a couple of comments here. So I've been working on the deep breathing exercises. Good. Okay. So deep breathing, as we practice, usually can be very, very relaxing. And it can be done really quickly. So, and you can also extend that into more of a formal mindfulness practice. So that's good. You can do it anywhere, right? You can do it while you're working. You can do it on the go, while you're doing errands, while you're taking care of business. So Doris says, unpleasant events, thoughts, trying to be mindful and think of the possibility of a positive outcome or the positive side of it. Great. So that's the idea, is that when we pause, take a couple of deep breaths, or to just be mindfully aware of how that unpleasant event or thought is affecting me, then you can take a couple of deep breaths. You can pause, and that's that whole idea of not reacting, but responding in a positive way. So you can choose that positive perspective. So that's great. Any other comments about your practice this past week? As I said, this is really, we're getting into the middle now. We're getting into the last 3 classes today in the next 2 weeks. So I hope that you're beginning to get some regular time set aside. That is one of the hardest things that people report. But to do a daily-ish kind of practice, it's so important. And also the informal practice will supplement those, like that stop practice, remember, and the 3-minute breathing space. All very, very helpful. I think that both of those are 2 of the most helpful things that you can do, and just develop a habit around. So the mini lesson is uncertainty and our emotions create strong waves, strong emotional waves. We're going to learn to surf rather than get tossed around by the waves. And then the quote from Tara Brach, our strongest and most habitual emotions are sometimes completely unconscious. Without mindfulness, these patterns can run our lives. That's kind of what we're really doing. That's the insight part of what we're learning in this type of meditations. We're learning to look underneath at a little bit of a deeper level so that we understand ourselves a little bit more, and those automatic subconscious conditioned patterns that are running in the background. And today we're really going to look at the emotions. So that's a little bit more of that. So hopefully you find it helpful. And so I don't know if you've ever heard of this acronym before, VUCA or VUCA, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. I came across this during the pandemic or towards the end of the pandemic, and it just made so much sense. Mishi Jha, she says here, if you've been feeling overwhelmed or unfocused, she's the author of Peak Mind, and it's all about focus. If you've struggled with staying on task or been blindsided by emotion during this time, me too. But this is precisely what our prior research regarding the human brain's attention system would predict. So, in other words, whenever we feel things are volatile, uncertain, complex, or ambiguous, that's going to happen. It's going to throw our attention and our focus and our emotional stability and our thoughts are being able to focus on, keep our thoughts centered. It's going to throw all that off. And it's not really your fault. The point is we're dealing with this. Now, think about, this isn't the pandemic, although we're still kind of dealing with the after effects, but just think about current politics. Think about things like climate change and the wars going on around the world, and some of the hurricanes and disasters that people have suffered through. That encompasses all those things, even if we feel it secondarily just by watching the news or all those kinds of things. It's going to affect our emotional state. So today we're going to try to gain some equanimity. That's what that's all about, and I'll explain that. So, having just mentioned that, I wasn't trying to kind of amp you up about some of that stuff, but how are you feeling? And so, might just be aware of how you're feeling just in the past day or so, picking one of these emojis, or maybe there's a mix of emotions, just picking one or two or three, perhaps. Sometimes there's a mix of negative and positive, and we have a range of emotions, right, as we go through the days. But we also get triggered by all that stuff, and that's one thing you can do, is regulate your news intake, regulate your social media intake, regulate all those sources of triggers that are out there that stimulate sometimes not so good emotions. So how are you feeling? Just kind of maybe pick one or two for yourself, based on, like I said, the past day or two. And the idea is simply to acknowledge your feelings. Our natural tendency is to want to push them away, not deal with them, or stuff them, or avoid them, or numb ourselves to them, especially when they're like anxiety or sadness or anger or something like that. But it's okay. I mean, we're human, right? You can't go through life without feeling some of these things. And so in a way, mindfully learning how to deal with this really helps us with our emotional intelligence. And the second point, the more we're unwilling to accept difficult feelings, the more they increase. It's kind of that saying, if you've ever heard it, the more we resist, the more it persists. So simply trying to acknowledge your feelings, and that, if you remember from the RAIN exercise that we talked about last week, part of that is to allow things to be as they are, to allow them, and to once we acknowledge them, we allow it to be. And so we'll try that a little bit during the meditation. And we realize that we can manage it the more we are curious about it, and the more we mindfully take a look at it, and take a look at our own response, and take a look at how we're feeling, and do all those things, it becomes more manageable. So the other part that makes it difficult is we often will sometimes judge ourselves, and we'll say we shouldn't be feeling this way or that way, and we get upset with ourselves, and we kind of make it worse sometimes, and that can fuel that as well. So we're going to explore how mindfulness can help unhook us from a cluster of thoughts or feelings that we're being self-judgmental about. And then maybe you found during the training that there's been a tendency to put yourself down in some way, like I know I've been saying, I hope you are developing a daily practice. Well, maybe you haven't been. Maybe that's been difficult. We all have very, very busy lives. So, but if you find yourself getting down on yourself and kind of beating yourself up for that, that's what I'm talking about. Please try not to do that. That's where it's be kind to yourselves. It's being kind to yourself is actually better in the long run than being critical of yourself. Okay, so um, the tendency to not feel good enough can arise in every domain of our life, right? At work, at home, our parenting, our work with our friends and our relationships, those kinds of things. And sometimes that's some of the underlying unconditioned, rather underlying condition patterns that we feel. And so we want to overcome that. What's the antidote for that? Well, it's self-compassion. And mindfulness really is the awareness in the first step to free ourselves from that inner critic, from that self-judgment. And because that just creates more tension and anxiety or depression. And so we want to, by being kind to ourselves, and we're going to talk more about this in the next class too. Well, actually, the last class. With mindfulness, you can start recognizing the pain of self-judgment, and you can pause and you can simply say, this hurts, and I'm hurting myself with this self-judgment, right? So just pausing and recognizing that. And we can bring mindful presence to the pain of judging, a natural compassion for ourselves and that's what we want to stimulate. We want that to arise like we would with our best friend. What would we say to our best friend who was saying those things, right? So it's a feeling of tenderness and care in the face of a difficult, often lifelong habit. So even to recognize that these are long-standing, deeply ingrained patterns sometimes that we've developed over the years. So don't expect it to go away right away. It's not going to. But mindfully paying attention and developing that mindfulness habit and continuing to do that, that is going to make a difference. So self-compassion is the antidote to self-judging. All right, so that brings us to the meditation today on emotions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea of we're going to learn how to kind of like be aware of the waves of emotions and learn how to but the idea is that we can't stop the waves that are going on in life. We can't stop a lot of that stuff that's going on in the world around us, right? We can't control a fair amount of things like the big stuff that I mentioned, the climate change, the what's happening in the world around us, the politics, although that will end after the election, but there's, one way or the other, people are, I think, on one side or the other going to have strong feelings about it. So we can't stop those waves, but we can learn how to surf on top of them. And that's by using the breath and the body that we've already talked about and being aware of the thoughts that fuel that. So during the meditation, we're going to also be aware of emotions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask him maybe to bring up something that's perhaps been a little bit of a trigger for even a small thing like I talked about with my lawn tractor. Maybe you found yourself, service of something was not the greatest lately, or somebody said something that rubbed you the wrong way, or you didn't get what you needed from an online order. There's so many different little things. So think of something kind of minor like that triggered some, not like really super intense, but kind of a more mild to moderate reaction. Okay. And I'll ask you to bring that up. But I'll show you how we can use the steadying calmness, in a sense, of our breath and the body anchoring, like we learned in the first couple of sessions, but also being aware of emotions like we're aware of thoughts. Okay, so let's do the meditation. See, check what time it is. And so, as we do with all of these meditations, find a comfortable position. Take a moment to adjust so that you're relaxed and balanced in your sitting position, relatively upright, so that you can remain alert and attentive, but also so that you can be relaxed. Whatever kind of chair you're sitting in or surface you're sitting on, just take this time to just be at ease. And close your eyes if you like. If you want to keep them open slightly, you can do that. Keep sort of a soft, unfocused gaze down in front of you. But either way, just turn inward and pay attention to the body. Let's start there. Just feel the sense of the body sitting. Feel that sense of being connected and anchored. And you can maybe do a quick scan through the body from top to bottom if you like, scanning through from the head on down, just to sort of, so you can even sort of feel this like wave, scanning down this wave of relaxation, going down through your whole body, releasing tension, letting the body settle and be grounded and anchored. All the way down to your feet. So that's a first step of kind of anchoring yourself. And then just sort of check in with yourself. How are you doing in the moment? How are things going so far for you today? Check in. What thoughts do you notice? What emotions are present? What sensations stand out in the body? And see if you can do this without judgment. So just as you notice, just watch them, be aware of them. Okay? And you may find yourself judging something. That's okay too. When you find yourself doing that, just say, oh, there I go. I'm judging that experience, whatever it was. Okay? And just recognize it, let go of it, and bring a sense of a smile or friendliness to yourself. That self-kindness is the antidote. Now let's also use breathing to anchor ourselves in the present moment. So let's just feel the general rise and fall of our breathing. Maybe lengthen a couple of breaths so you really take a deeper in breath and a longer, slower out breath. Let that relax you, especially as you breathe out. Sigh it out, just let it all release and relax. And then as your breath begins to return to its natural rhythm, just follow the breath. You can pick a spot if you like, if it helps to zero in on, like one point of the breath, whether you feel it at the nose or the windpipe or the chest and the lungs or the belly. If there's one spot that is really easy to feel the breath, you can just keep your attention focused there. And then keep following the breath. It's just going to be our kind of our stabilizing force along with the body. And of course, whenever you notice that the mind wanders and your attention gets pulled away from the breath, that's okay too. Don't give yourself a hard time. Just notice that, let go, and then bring yourself back to the next breath so that you re-anchor, come back to the present moment by reconnecting with the breath or reconnecting with the body. Either one is fine. They're our anchor, even in choppy waters. So just being present with the breath, noticing whatever arises without judgment, like waves, things are going to arise while you rest on the stable platform of your breathing and the body being grounded. Okay? Now, I'm going to invite you to bring to mind a situation or difficulty in your life, that thing that I mentioned, whatever it is, nothing big. And as you remember and picture this difficulty, let yourself remember how it feels. And be aware of one of the difficult emotions that arise at this time. Might be anger or anxiety or fear or hurt. Don't focus on the story now. Be aware of the feeling. Just notice the feeling for what it is. Don't focus on, all those circumstances. Focus on how you felt about it. And then drop down and sense that feeling in your body. Notice where it is. Let it be here for a time. Breathing to make space for it. And you can name the emotion softly to yourself if you like. That's a kind of acknowledging and recognizing, allowing it space to be here, to be present, and let it be here in this field of mindfulness. Now add compassion, self-compassion. Don't judge the feeling and try to make it go away, but hold it with compassion for yourself, for all the suffering that's connected with it. And see how it responds to the compassion. And as you feel this feeling, you might imagine how many others are experiencing this same feeling across the world. And let your compassion grow as well.
Hi.
I'll ask you to mute yourself if you can, but I'll actually do that for everybody, just to cut down on the background noise. Okay, and oops. And the other thing you can do is if it is an overwhelming feeling or something that gets a little bit more emotional, you can always come back to the anchor of the breath. So feeling the next breath, maybe taking another deeper breath, feeling the body being anchored and grounded and centered. Feel that connection your feet make with the ground. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Those are both good anchors to kind of stabilize and help us to kind of ride on the waves itself, rather than getting pulled about by the waves, rather than getting submerged by the waves. Just getting a little bit of control so that we learn to surf on top of the waves, or at least to swim with the waves. And that's a practice that we can do, is to be aware of those emotional responses. You might also notice what thinking is going along with it. Sometimes thinking fuels that a little bit. So you might notice thoughts arise that are attached to that stressful situation. And sometimes thoughts make it worse, and realize, like we talked before, that you can be aware of which thoughts are helpful. And you can, if they're not helpful, if unhelpful thoughts are coming up, you can take that opportunity to make it more of a positive spin. To what are your options to see if you can change your perspective on it. Okay, and that's that power of the thinking that we can bring to the exercise. So as we come back to the sensations of our breathing, continuing on, just feeling the breath in and out, kind of letting ourselves float on the waves of the breath. As we begin to finish, when you're ready, you can bring your attention back into the body. Feel the connection with the chair and the earth beneath it. You can open your eyes, lift your gaze, reconnect with your surroundings, maybe move a little bit. And remember that anytime during the day, you can check in with yourself, noticing these thoughts and emotions, noticing how you respond to these triggers with an attitude of acceptance. And when you're experiencing an emotion, you might want to try riding the wave, either through simply observing the emotion, connecting to the breath and the body, letting it anchor you, and then letting yourself float on top of it. And then maybe take some skillful or helpful action for that situation. Okay, so that's our meditation for today. Would love to hear what you thought about that. Any comments about what that was like for you, or questions? This is getting a little bit more, in depth, a little bit kind of going under the surface layers in a way, as we explore thoughts and emotions. Any questions, any comments? And hopefully what it does is it brings us to more of a sense of equanimity, that word I was talking about before, which, as you can see, is more of a mental calmness and composure, evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. So let's see. Thank you. Hard to keep the mind clear, but I definitely see progress. Good. Well, yeah. And so the mind isn't always going to be clear, especially when there's a lot of emotions going on. So don't worry if you can't make the mind clear. That just may not happen. That's that turbulence that I'm talking about, the waves that are going on. Sometimes it's just going to be really choppy. So just accept the waves, try to roll on top of them with the breath and your perspective. That reminded me of a roller coaster, had the thought, then dissected it and moved on. Okay, good. So there's a lot of metaphors for this. A roller coaster is a good one. And you can also, with a roller coaster, think about, it can be a little bit scary. That's one way to look at it, but it also can be a little bit exciting. So it's another way to look at it. There's a fine line between the two, right? Definitely seeing progress. Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I hope most of you are on some level. So this is a skill that I think the more we do it, the more we feel some progress. So that's good to hear. So here are a bunch of synonyms for equanimity. Won't go through all of them, but as you can see, there's some pretty nice ones: calmness, serenity, tranquility, presence of mind, self-confidence, poise, equilibrium. Some, that we can cultivate this. We can learn to really do this for ourselves as we go along. So this link here, when you get the slides, takes you to a YouTube meditation on cultivating equanimity. So you might want to try that. And again, this might hopefully bring you to a state of calm and ease, which gives you a little bit of a clarity. May not always either. So recognize that too. Sometimes you still notice some, this is what, the turbulence feels like a little bit, right? When we're in the midst of the waves. And if you've ever body surfed or been in the waves like this, it can get a little bit scary. It can get a little bit overwhelming. But again, this is from Jon Kabat-Zinn. It's really just a way of learning how to manage the inevitable unpredictability of life. In his words, he's the one that came up with the phrase, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. just think that's such a great way to think about it. So with this image, even this little boy here, learning to surf, we can all learn to surf. And thinking about that complex skill of, if you've ever tried it, or any complex sport, or learning a language or an instrument or anything like that, it's very difficult, right? So it takes practice. And that's, again, what we're doing in this class. And with the meditations, we're trying to practice till we get to that point where we're at least can stand on the surfboard, or at least can play a few notes, or at least can learn a few phrases, whatever it is, whatever complex skill you're learning. And this quote from Tara Brach: research shows that mindfulness training increases our access to balance, resilience, and accurate perceptions, even in the midst of strong emotions. Neuropsychology calls this expanding our window of tolerance. So there's been a lot of research around this, and mindfulness training is one of the most effective ways to do this. I think it really does help us. This expanding our window of tolerance is another way of kind of saying, help us be more emotionally intelligent. And emotional intelligence, really what that comes down to is recognizing our emotions, being able to label them, beginning to gain a little bit of understanding where are they coming from in ourselves, but then also recognizing and understanding them when we witness them in other people. And then that gives us the space, and that's why I think mindfulness is such a great skill in all this. That gives us the space, a little bit of window of tolerance, and a window in the space of that response that we've been talking about, rather than reaction, gives us the space to take that time to be able to learn how to surf. Okay, so our daily practices for the coming week are, there's this link here will take you to that same meditation page. So it's there is an emotion meditation, but there's a couple of others there. This one is also takes you to a YouTube equanimity. You can try either one of those. But there are some other ones on that meditation page. There's a reduced stress category. There's also a COVID-19 related category. There's a couple of different ones that you might try that are similar to the emotion one. So, but definitely try the emotion one, and then maybe some other ones. And the informal practice is that 3 breaths for a mindful pause that we did at the beginning. And I do have a slide on that, or the stop. So remember, the stop is simply, S is to stop, T is to take a mindful breath or 2 or 3. The O is to observe. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's going on in the body? And then proceed. Okay. And then continue to notice how you respond to both pleasant and unpleasant events. And then also remember the 3-minute breathing space. That's really just like the stop exercise, but a little bit longer. So 3 minutes. And if you're using the logs, I would recommend that. I'll send the log along as well so that you can record your experience as you go through these. Here's the 3 breaths for a mindful pause, just to remind you. It's real simple. Take a deep mindful breath, feel the breath itself, the physical sensations. Second breath is notice the body. What does it need? How does it feel? Right? Whatever it needs, allow it to happen. The third is to take a deep breath and be kind to yourself. And that's part of what I'm talking about with the self-compassion, of course. And I think that's really important for all of this kind of more difficult, tougher stuff when it gets to difficult emotions. So more resources, just to remind you that EFR website has that whole page. It's just another link to that same page. You might be using apps, so continue to do that. If you need help with any of those, just let me know. And I'll be on for a couple minutes once we close out today's class. If you have any questions, happy to answer any questions that you might have. And then the YouTube playlist, that's my channel on YouTube, where I've been putting all this stuff. There's other classes that we've done. There's refresher webinars that we do every month. If you're not already on that, you might want to join the refresher webinar that you can find on LMS. Just actually search for mindfulness refresher. And then every month on the second Wednesday of the month from 12:30 to 1:15 is when we do those. And it's just a great way to continue your practice and get a little bit more instruction. Also, the phone meditations, don't forget those. Those are another place where you can tune in live. And so please feel free to join me in those. And then also there's 3 pre-recorded meditations, again, on this 203-688-6185 number. And that's just another way to easily get them. Just another reminder about EFR and the services that we provide through the program. I think this is our last slide. So with that, I will say thanks so much for joining me. I'm going to stop the share, and then I'll stop the recording as well. And thanks so much for joining me in the class. And good luck in the coming week with your practices.